Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, September the 9th at approximately 3:55 in the afternoon. I am James Exum. My yogic name is Sakshi, which means the witness, and that's the name I've given my soul, the witness, through all my years of yogic studies and teachings and etc. I'm continuing my series of discourses on the Bhagavad Gita. This will be chapter 16. It's a comparative discourse using the narrative thoughts of Adi Sankara and myself as a yogic scholar. My specialty is comparative religious studies and comparative yogic philosophy betwixt the various texts and holy books having to do with the subject of yoga. I'll begin with my introduction now, if you don't mind. The Bhagavad Gita is one of the world's most profound philosophical and spiritual classics. It presents a dialogue between Arjuna, who is the royal prince, and Lord Krishna, who is incarnated as his driver in their chariot on the edge of the great battlefield, which is the battle's about to occur. Krishna delves into the complexities of duty, righteousness, and the nature of reality. He does all this to teach Arjuna, who is young and a bit despondent at the beginning of the book, the Gita. Chapter 16, known as the Daivasura Sampad Vibhaga Yoga, or the yoga division between the divine and the non-divine, stands as a pivotal section in which the contrast between the virtuous, which is the divine, and the non-virtuous, which is the demonic qualities, are laid bare. This chapter is a testament to Vyasa, who is the author of the Gita and the Mahabharata, from which the Gita is extracted. It offers a testament of his brilliant insight into human nature and the cosmic order. To further illuminate Vyasa's wisdom, this comparative discourse examines the commentarial approaches to the great Advaita philosopher, philosophers Sankara and myself as a contemporary interpreter of a lot of the Vedic and Upanishadic and so forth texts. While Sankara captures the subtle nuances of Vedantic thought, my modern explanation invites the seeker to engage with the Gita's teachings through the lens of contemporary philosophy and psychological insight. When I use the word Gita as opposed to the Bhagavad Gita, that is not an insult to the great book, or the great lessons of the book, or the historical teachings. We use the term Bible as opposed to Holy Bible. That's not an insult to the Holy Bible. Neither is Gita an insult to the Bhagavad Gita. It's just a short and truncated version of the title. The structure and themes of chapter 16, I give subdivisional titles to break down my discourses when I write them. I also write in the third person, so occasionally you'll see me mistakenly say Sakshi says or James Exum says because I write in the third person. But I will correct that as I go along. As I do my commentary, you'll see me occasionally back up and correct my commentary. This is audio revision is what's happening there. I'm doing audio revisions because I am an old writer and I'm in the habit of correcting my writings through corrections and reviews. Chapter 16 opens with Krishna enumerating the qualities that lead an individual toward liberation, and they are, quote, fearlessness, purity of heart, steadfastness in knowledge and yoga, charity, self-control, non-violence, truthfulness and absence of anger, renunciation, compassion, non-covetousness, gentleness, modesty, and an absence of fickleness, amongst other qualities. These are divine qualities that Daivasura Sampad, that foster harmony, self-realization, and ultimately freedom. And we are all seeking in yoga, students of yoga, seekers of the right path of yoga, which is the dharmic path, of using karma, action, karmic action, which is the positive action, not the negative or the neutral. In sharp contrast, Krishna lists the demonic, which is asuri, A-S-U-R-I, asuri traits as they're quoted as hypocrisy, arrogance, self-conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance, which binds the soul to the cycle of birth and suffering, which is another name for that. Yoga phrase for that is samsara, which is a oft-time heard phrase. The chapter's underlying message is that one's disposition is shaped by thought, action, and intention. And being shaped as such, it will eventually determine one's destiny. Vyasa's wisdom, the universal categories of human nature. This is my next subdivision. Vyasa is credited with compiling and organizing the Gita, and he demonstrates a remarkable universality in his classification of divine and demonic tendencies. He does not limit the discourse by birth or social status, but insists that character and actions are the true determinants of one's spiritual progress. Well, I agree with that 100%. Well, obviously I do, I wrote it. But even before I wrote it, that was one of my mindsets, one of my standards, traits that I incorporate in my daily life. Vyasa's categorical approach transcends culture and time, addressing the perennial tension between vice and virtue, or virtue and vice, is how I actually wrote it. Sankara's Vedantic critical interpretation and explanation. This is his exegesis. Adi Shankara, one of the most celebrated philosophers of the Indian tradition, wrote a detailed commentary, which is, again, a Sanskrit word, Vyasa, on the Bhagavad Gita, elucidating the verses through the prism of Advaita Vedanta. In his interpretation, Shankara highlights the essentiality of cultivating divine qualities as prerequisites for self-knowledge. And the phrase in Sanskrit is Atma Janana. Atma Janana, not Atman, Atma Janana. Okay? According to Sankara, the divine qualities listed by Krishna are not merely ethical injunctions, but reflections of the inner purity and required for realizing the unity of Atman, which is the individual soul. Your Sakshi is the witness, which is another name for the individual soul. Sorry, I'm wearing a shirt that's fresh out of the laundry that has not been ironed, but I was in a casual mood today, and I've made so many of these now, I think I can loosen up a bit. At least I comb my hair and brush my beard. The unity of Atman, the individual soul, and Brahman, the universal consciousness. You will find that they're actually one and the same, but that's a paradoxical statement that will be explained fully further down the path of my creating these videos for YouTube for your listening and learning pleasure. In his view, the chapter implores the seeker to discriminate between the real and the unreal, to turn inward, and to eradicate ignorance and vidya, which lies at the root of demonic tendencies. Sankara is particularly attentive to the non-dualistic implications of the Gita's teachings. He sees the divine qualities as manifestations of knowledge and the demonic qualities, in parentheses, as forms of ignorance. For Sankara, self-realization is not a matter of ritual or social identity, but of the inner transformation, a theme that echoes throughout his Gita commentary. Dr. Carl Jung was very much influenced by some of Sankara's commentaries. In fact, his individuation may have sprung from such a comment as the one I just read to you. Now we're going into my modern perspective on the Gita, especially chapter we're on now. I am known in spiritual circles as Sakshi. I bring a contemporary interpretive framework to the Gita, grounded in both traditional scholarship and modern philosophy. My readings of chapter 16, my reading of chapter 16 is exploring the psychological and existential dimension of Vyasa's wisdom. I approach the division between the divine and demonic as archetypes. Again, I'm influenced by Jung. Jung was influenced by the Gita and the commentaries of Sankara. So it's like the grandfather and the father, and I'm the grandson, yes, and the son. Whenever I approach the division between divine and demonic as archetypes present within every human psyche. Psyche is another word for soul. Rather than externalizing these qualities, I encourage the reader to recognize their presence within the self. In other words, this is all there. It has been there and shall be there. The soul is immortal. It is outside of space and time as far as its enduring qualities, as is Brahman, the creator. The soul is simply a spark of the divine on loan to the human body from the first breath to the last breath, and then it returns to the source. The Gita, from this perspective, is a manual for self-examination and inner alchemy. Now, when I say alchemy, alchemy is transmutation or transmogrification. It's not necessarily having to do with lead into gold. You can have an alchemic reaction in a personality change, so to speak. It's a manual for self-examination and inner alchemy. I correlate Krishna's catalog of traits with modern understandings of emotional intelligence. You have IQ and you have emotion, you have intellectual quotas, IQ, and you have emotional intelligence, EQ, so to speak. Ethical psychology and personal development, understanding of emotional intelligence, ethical psychology, and personal development. I also explore the societal implications of these qualities in my reading of this chapter. The cultivation of divine attributes is not only a personal mandate, but a foundation for the harmonious collective existence. I draw a parallel between the Gita's guidance and the universal quest for meaning, fulfillment, and the resolution of inner conflict. These are very positive things, and if you're new to me, then you need to watch a few of these, and then you'll become accustomed to my way of speaking and my level of speaking, and you'll also become accustomed to rewinding and taking notes and doing your own research. When you research, I suggest using Wikipedia as a source for research of, concerning my lectures, my discourses on the subject of yoga philosophy. The basic core of all my discourses, all my talks, all my videos is yoga philosophy. I'm an old yogi, and I'm a yoga philosopher, a historian, and comparative data, as I mentioned earlier. So what we're doing is I draw parallels between the Gita's guidance and the universal quest for meaning, fulfillment, and the resolution of inner conflict. Now, I'm going to do here a comparative discourse between Sankara's historical viewpoint of this chapter of the Gita and his opinions and his narrations on it, and my contemporary opinions and commentary on the same chapter, on the present chapter. Ontology and psychology. Sankara's explanations are rooted in ontology, the study of being. He interprets the divine and demonic as metaphysical realities, insisting the true self, in its purity, is the ground of all virtue. I, however, am more inclined to a psychological analysis. I regard these qualities as facets of human consciousness, advocating for self-awareness and personal integration as the means to liberation. My usage of integration in a lot of my philosophy and the work it's capable of accomplishing in a positive manner is not an original idea at all. It came from my years of studying and listening to Swami Satchidananda, who died, I believe, around 1908 or 2008, 2010, somewhere in there, and rest his soul, bless his soul, rest his soul, bless his heart. He was a great teacher. He was the one from Woodstock. He was famous for that. He also was one of the founders, if not the original founder, of integral yoga. He didn't really care what sect you came from or what religion you came from. If you were interested in yoga philosophy and wanted to learn the values of yoga and the ways of positive yoga and its influence on the liberation of your soul before you leave this world, you were more than welcome into his world, and he taught as such. Self-realization and self-transformation. For Sankara, the emphasis on self-realization through knowledge, the dawn of awareness that one is not ego but universal self. Well, I also teach that. Sakshi, I see self-transformation as a dynamic process of blending knowledge with psychological growth and ethical actions. I truly do. Ethics in society. Sankara's reading is primarily concerned with individual liberation, moksha, whereas my primary concern expands the scope to include societal well-being. For myself, the cultivation of divine qualities enhances not only the individual, but also the wider community. This is the integration I was speaking of. And it bridges the personal and collective spheres in general. Well, in general, but also in particular, depending on the subject at hand and the way it's being spoken about at that point in time. The key verses and their interpretation. So we're going to examine some of the pivotal verses of chapter 16 and their comparative interpretation. Verses 1 through 3, the divine qualities. Krishna enumerates the Daivasura Sampad, fearlessness, purity, constantly in knowledge and yoga, charity, self-restraint, non-violence, true freedom from anger, renunciation, and compassion. Sankara ideas about this. These qualities are a natural expression of a mind purified through self-knowledge. Well, how do you purify the mind? Well, you have to learn of yourself. Man, know thyself. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. There's probably a half a dozen, if not more, adages about such, and they echo down through the halls of history. From the Greek to the Romans to the Hindis to the Latin to whomever, Romans. As I already said, they are the ornaments of the wise and fruit of discrimination between self and non-self. That's Sankara, talking about the qualities of natural expression now in in my opinion, these are the attributes of emotional maturity and ethical awareness. Well, the more emotionally mature you are, the higher your emotional IQ, so to speak. And that only makes sense. I mean, one of the things that attracted me to the philosophy of yoga is the logic of yoga. I'm not talking about the mythology of yoga. I'm not talking about getting into the gods and the monkey gods and the, and the floating on clouds and the hooded snake behind the image of the god or any of that. I'm talking about the philosophy of yoga. I'm not into the Hindu religion. I'm into the yoga philosophy. Anything that's logical to me that I can do comparative studies about and not find a snag or a flaw or an error or a misconception or a direct contradiction, then I'm moved to go in that direction as far as assimilating that into my life and to my ethics and to my morals and to my dogma. I liken these traits as they are identified in contemporary positive psychology to empathy, resilience, and equanimity. Verse 4, the demonic qualities. They are hypocrisy, arrogance, pride, anger, harshness, and ignorance, and they are cataloged as Daivasura Sampad. Sankara sees these, they're born as being born from ignorance and they lead to bondage. Sankara warns that indulgence in such traits perpetuates delusion and suffering. But I have no quarrels with that way of looking at it, none at all. In fact, he is one of my greatest teachers. He is one of my greatest teachers. And I respect him, and you very seldom see me try to butt heads with the man. I mean, how can you even try to argue or debate with a man that his writings and his philosophy and his insight has stood the test of time since the 700s Common Era. 700s, so that's what 21 for the 14th centuries. He's been the standard. He's been the voice. He's been the status quo. He has been the recognized authority. I was only born in 1950, and I've only been dealing with this for right around 50 years. I'm about to turn 75. Happy birthday to me on September the 30th. So that's his points on it. My points are, I interpret these as patterns of dysfunction and self-sabotage. I suggest mindful self-inquiry as a tool to root out these tendencies. He sees them as ignorance leading to bondage. I see them as patterns of dysfunction and self-sabotage that can be remedied through mindful self-inquiry. This is how I see you root out these tendencies. Of course, 14 centuries separate our opinions on this subject about chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita, the commentary. This is why we're having a discourse on his opinion versus my opinion. You'll also see that there are comparative opinions and there are diversive opinions. We sometimes split the blanket, and sometimes we travel the same path together concerning an opinion that does not diverge from each other. The choice of destiny is the next one, verse 5. Krishna asserts that divine qualities lead to liberation while the demonic result in bondage. Well, that's a variation of what was just said by Sankara. Sankara obviously 100% agrees with that. The path to freedom is through knowledge and the renunciation of ignorance. And that's how simply Sankara can write a brilliant observation that's just compact, concise, beautiful, full of elegance and truth. My same quote on it would be, liberation is cultivated through self-knowledge. You see, I go back to self-knowledge. he goes back to knowledge in general and the renunciation of ignorance. Well, I also say get rid of ignorance. But mind liberation is cultivated through self-knowledge, ethical living, and psychological integration. So you see, I'm affected by Dr. Carl Jung, I'm affected by Satchidananda, I'm affected by Vivekananda, I'm affected by Adi Shankara, I'm affected by a multiplicity of great thinkers and practitioners of yoga philosophy. I have the advantage over Sankara in one, and I'm saying this humbly, in one sense. I have the events and advents and progress of history since his demise up to this point in time, this historical package, library, from which I can extract wisdom that was not available to him. So that is my one advantage. The modern relevance of chapter 16. The enduring wisdom of chapter 16 lies in its universality, applicability. Vyasa's insights, revealed through Krishna's voice, address the perennial struggle between our higher and lower nature, Jekyll and Hyde. A theme as vital today as it was a millennium ago. Through Shankara's philosophical rigor and my psychological insight, readers are invited to bridge the ancient and the modern. And it is a bridge. I am trying to create a bridge between the ancient and the modern concept of yoga philosophy by giving you these videos and sharing my knowledge with you that I've acquired over the last 50-odd years. In an age of uncertainty and rapid change, the cultivation of divine qualities, fearlessness, truth, compassion, they remain the bedrock of personal and collective well-being. The Gita's calls to self-refinement, discernment, and ethical action, which is also my call, and of course I got the idea from the Gita, echoes across cultures and centuries. Well, that's my cross-pollination, that's my integration, that's my modernization of the thoughts on the subject. Challenging cultures and echoes across cultures and centuries, challenging each generation, and I'm challenging you. I don't know what your generation is, but if you're young, so be it. If you're my generation or older, so be it. But I challenge everyone that hears my voice and listens to my words and allows me to narrate my writings to them to help integrate them into modern yoga philosophy, to help liberate them to reach moksha before they leave this earth. I want you to do this because it will help you realize your highest yogic potential. Now, in conclusion, chapter 16 of the Gita is a mirror held up to the human soul, reflecting both its shadows and its light. Vyasa's timeless shadow and light's very important. Shadow or darkness is ignorance, light is intelligence or wisdom. Vyasa's timeless wisdom, as revealed through the interpretations of Sankara and myself, urge everyone to transcend ignorance, actualize our divine nature, and contribute to the harmony of the world. Through a comparative lens, we see the Gita's message not confined to any one philosophy or era, but unfolds anew in every sincere seeker. And if you're listening to these, and if you've listened to all of them so far, you are definitely a sincere seeker, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Shankara's Advaitic vision and my holistic explanations together illuminate the path of transformation. That's the alchemy. One that leads from division to unity. Yoga means unity. It means to yoke, to unite. From confusion to clarity, and from limitations to the boundless freedom of the self. And I wish the boundless freedom of the self for each one of my seekers, my listeners, and my attendees to my talks, my lectures, my discourses, etc. Well, there it is, and I know it was a bit deep, but yoga philosophy is not for the weak-minded or the emotionally weak either. You do not go to a lecture in advanced theoretical physics if you're a kindergartner, and so it is with my talks. The more you get into yoga, the easier it will be for you to listen to me and learn from my writings. And all I'm basically doing is borrowing data from other writers and other commentators for the last 4,000 or 5,000 years. I mean, that's how far back it goes. In fact, one of my series is I've created the history of yoga as a series. I think there's so many chapters, maybe 10 chapters, taking it all the way back from the very beginning of the teachings up to modern times. So here we are at the top of the hour, so to speak, or the half hour. 30 minutes and 31 minutes have just passed. So I will do as I always do at this point. I will thank you for listening. I will also, if you enjoyed it, I will definitely thank you for that. And if you were a bit confused, or it was too much, or you didn't really care for my style and my technique, that's okay too. You're welcome to come back and try again later if you wish. I always basically close with the same idea, and that is to be good to yourself, to be good to each other, especially your friends and family and strangers, and to pass that idea along and ask others to pass the idea along. And who knows, someday we may wake up in a reformed world, in a world where tyranny and self-centeredness is not center stage, and the politicians have come back to their senses, and society is, the balance of society is once again leveling out, and everyone's getting along with each other again, and not everybody's tearing each other down because of red, blue, or any purple, or any color variation that can be combined. And hopefully this will come about soon. And then we can look at each other once again and say, oh, we're back to Earth One, a semi-normal society. It's never perfect, never has been, never shall be. But it was a hell of a lot better than it is now, before the modern political influences took power. Yes. And I could say that because I'm not a pope, I'm not a priest, I'm not a bishop, I'm a yogi. And yogis can say hell and damn and rat's ass and all sorts of phrases, because yoga is the science of life, the science of living. It is not a religion. Well, thank you for listening. Hope I didn't offend anyone. If I did, well, so be it. Que sera, sera. Didn't mean to. You know, some people are sensitive. And goodbye to you, and I'll see you in my next video.